We just had an extraordinary Samatha session with Jack Nissen, who hopefully will be joining us somewhere via the mystery of the internet. And you might give me a nod when he's there. Yeah, so Jack will be appearing on a screen somewhere. In here in Dublin, I'm joined by Iseult Byrne, the CEO of Dublin City Council Culture Company, and Deborah Callagher of the Royal Irish Academy of Music. And we're here to talk about creativity. We're here to talk about, can you nurture it? Can you teach it? Can you make it grow? Jack, do you want to give us a wave just so we can check your file? He's there, and we'll sort the technical bit out as we go. Jack has just run digitally from one screen to another one, and isn't entirely over our heads. So when we were thinking about Creative Brain Week, we were thinking about can you teach it? Can you nurture it? We were listening to Professor Robinson this morning talking about the experience of being a young person in school and having the creativity kind of knocked out of you, dismissed a little bit. And now we want to talk about the opposite. We want to talk about, well, how do you make it grow? And what can it do? So I'm going to invite these three good people to give a little talk, a little bit of a presentation on the work that they do. And then we're going to see what we can spin from those threads, what we can develop from them. So, Deborah Callagher of the Royal Irish Academy of Music, would you like to take the microphone?
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon, everyone. I decided to call my presentation, which is going to come up on a slide any minute, Creating the Potential for Creativity to Flourish, the view from the Music Conservatoire. So I must have been in robust form when I decided to be the only view of the Music Conservatoire. Of course, it is a view from the Music Conservatoire. And I wanted to locate it. This opening few statements from all of us is really just to say who we are and where we stand in relation to this really important topic, which I just took from Creative Brain Week. When I looked at this description of what was going on this week, with the exception of brain science, which we definitely don't do in the Academy, everything else about social development, technology, entrepreneurship, culture, well-being and physical is absolutely part of what goes on in a music conservatoire. So if we say, well, what is a music conservatoire? And what is the Royal Irish Academy of Music in particular to start? Well, the Academy is based just down the road on Westland Row. We were founded in 1848 at the end of the Great Famine by a group of artists and musicians who felt that the country's rebirth should include the arts, whilst sport and elsewhere was going on in that regeneration. Since then, we've become a national conservatoire for music. So you can enter the Academy at the age of 2 for lessons and emerge 27 years later with a doctorate in music performance accredited by Trinity College Dublin, which sounds rather scary, but it is true. So we teach across a life cycle of music. And in fact, this September, we're opening an adult division. So we're going to be going even further into the life cycle of music for beginners or returners over the age of 21. We also have a national examination body. So we examine, assess in 1,700 locations all over Ireland, about 40,000 musicians who are taught by about 7,000 private music teachers. So we have a responsibility to develop the artistic practice of quite a broad range of people. About 1 million people have studied in the Academy or been assessed by the Academy since our foundation. That little photo there is the Academy Orchestra in 1900. Pre-COVID kind of setup. My little clicker isn't being very responsive, so let me try and see if I can move us on in another way. So, joy with the slides. Fabulous. Now, Ireland and the Academy in a European context, because I'm very aware I'm going to be sharing the stage with a colleague from Scotland whose work I hugely admire. And Dominic asked me to kind of reflect, well, where does the Academy stand in European context? There's a photo there of a piano, an early piano. And in fact, the very first solo piano recital ever took place in Dublin in 1768, 2 weeks before J.C. Bach was famously to do the first solo recital in London, which admittedly was a bigger deal. But it gives an indication that Ireland has a very unique ability to be exceptional in certain niches or at certain historic moments. So you also see a picture of Bajazet, which is a recent opera that was on by Irish National Opera, which has been nominated for an Olivier Award. This is an Irish opera company that took a Vivaldi opera to the Royal Opera House in London and performed Vivaldi in that stage for the first time ever in the opera's history. So there's an audacity and a joie de vivre in terms of what we can do, certainly in my area, which is the classical music area. You see a photograph of Mairead McCran there, an Irish graduate who was the first female leader of the Vienna Orchestra, and she by a blind audition. Essentially, it can disempower. So the conservatoire itself, where I work, was invented for a reason. In the 18th century, your Mozarts, your Haydns, these were jobbing composers. They were performer composers, improvisers. Largely, they didn't particularly think their works would survive them. They weren't really thinking about this. But there was no place to develop professional musicians beyond the court or the church for a growing market. So in the 19th century, when you had the Industrial Revolution and you had the rise of the middle class in bigger cities, there was more market for music. So you had larger halls, larger orchestras, opera houses. The conservatoire was grown to develop musicians for that market. So you see another photograph, a pre-COVID orchestra photograph. This is a photograph of the Curtis Institute Orchestra in around 1910. They were developed to have a particularly wide vibrato in their violin string playing. This is a big wobble because the Philadelphia Hall was a really dry acoustic. So they actually trained musicians to try and rich up that acoustic. You see a picture there of Beethoven because he was one of the first composers who was to say, well, maybe my music will outlast me. And that's what the conservatoire was there to do, to conserve, preserve this exceptional classical music. But in terms of creativity, there were unintended consequences from this, because it goes back to what we call the master-apprentice model, that you are an excellent violinist and your student will learn at your feet. But if your student attempts to be creative and individualistic, this is something that the gatekeepers of artistic standards would say, well, no, there's a tradition here. Follow the tradition and you'll be okay. If you go away from the tradition, not so good. Also, at this time in the 19th century, you had the colonization of Africa, for instance, but you also had the colonization of classical music. So a group of Germans got together and said, well, who's a brilliant composer? Who's A-list? Who's B-list? At that moment, female composers, underrepresented composers from ethnicities that weren't white, were pushed to the side and regarded as less. So these were the kinds of unintended things that the conservatoire would have. So shooting forward to the 21st century and what creativity means to us now, how are things changing from that replication model to something that's actually more like the 18th century, the Mozart, Haydn, Beethovens, where they were more versatile and flexible instrumentalists. So how are we nurturing creativity in our students in the 21st century? We're giving them more choice. That's the first thing. We know now that not everybody wants to work in an orchestra or an opera house or be a solo recitalist. We're looking at situational excellence. If their creativity wants them to give a truly excellent performance in a care home, as opposed to the Wigmore Hall, then we are going to support that and try and help them understand what that means. That's a big deal in conservatoire worlds, to go away from the fact that the best Sibelius concerto means you are the best musician. We are also looking after their longevity, because in order to be creative, you need to feel safe and you need to be healthy, in our view. So we have yoga, we have performance psychology, we have a lot of somatic classes in order to help them. And we're also working with them, driven by our students, to feel a sense of social responsibility, the artist as citizen, so that they're not just isolated masters of their technique, but they actually understand the context and the value of what they're doing. One of the most exciting creative things for me, aside from all of that, which is a big job of work, is in looking at inclusive creativity. So one of the biggest things that the Academy is doing at the moment is working with musicians with intellectual and physical disabilities and working towards a new aesthetic where there is music that will work in concert halls, it'll work in every setting, but it is not predicated on maybe the standards of playing scales fast or having the dexterity to play an instrument. In the age of technology, there's no reason why we can't be as creative as this. So I suppose in summary in the Academy, what we're focusing on is we're focusing more on flexibility, on what the individual wants to do with their lives, listening to that, centering in that. We have the ability to do it because it's mostly one-to-one lessons. And I think the future for music in Ireland, and certainly for the creativity of our beloved students, is very bright. I look forward to talking more about it. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's the history of the conservatoire in 15 minutes. And just before I quote you for a second, just because, so there's so much packed into that, which we can unpick in a minute, but just one little thing is that question about quality. So as you look towards the future, does that mean you need lots of different measures of quality? How does that work?
That's exactly it. Artistic standards and inclusivity, it's a tension in conservatoire at the moment, that if you are more accessible to different social demographics, will that be a lowering of artistic quality? But actually, I don't accept that. I believe that there are different measures of success and different metrics that you use to different situations. But that will take a little bit of time because the gatekeeper aspect of, this is how you play well, is something that needs to be kind of unpacked and interrogated, and it's starting to happen in conservatoires now.
And in the European context, that's a specific moment in time in history in...
Very much. I mean, I'm Vice President of the Association of European Conservatoires, which is 300 conservatoires, including the top conservatoires in the world. They're all having this conversation. Time is gone for just replicating the same narrow band of repertoire. And now they're starting to say, well, what's our function in society? What's our relevance? Because it's not just altruistic. They know they may become irrelevant if they don't start to understand what most of the world actually wants from music and creativity.
Which is a really brilliant bridge. I love the way this works, as though it was all planned.
As if.
It's all done.
Thank you very much. Just from a tech point of view, I think the weird thing that's about to explode here is a hot mic, and it's like giving some feedback. So there's a bit of a weird noise coming for us, but I don't know. I hope it doesn't. So my name is Aoife Byrne. I am the Chief Executive of Dublin City Council Culture Company, and I just want to quickly introduce our work. We do a lot of different kind of work, so it's going to be a very fast introduction on a lot of different types of working. So just bear with me, some of the slides are pretty dense as well. So I suppose the clicker isn't going to work for me, I think, or is it? If we can go to the slides. I'll keep talking and the slides will catch up. We just 2 days ago entered our 5th year as a company. And I wanted to, the next slide is showing the constitutional objectives that were and are part of how we were set up and why we were set up. And if you saw the slide, it'd be fantastic because it's all about a citizen's voice. It is all about creation and co-creation. It is people at the center of what we do. So we're applying a working practice to all the different things that we do that constitutionally, and not only for the company, but for everybody who works there operationally, are just embedded as something that we do. The idea is that our themes are responding to the work of other people, to the ideas of other people and the wishes of other people, that we are always talking to other people, and that we work through expertise and sharing a partnership on things that try to be excellent, and work in this kind of developmental way. Our mission is to connect people and communities through culture and creativity. We're looking to ignite imaginations and experiences. We believe in the social value of culture. We believe in the power of human stories, and that we know when people are connected to their communities that they are safer, stronger and healthier. And these are bold statements, but they're statements we don't question. We believe in our work practice, and we move on from them to do the work that we do. Our way is, like I said, is to listen and to respond to the things that we hear. So we run open consultation processes, and we have done for 5-6 years through other pilot initiatives, and we respond and make the kind of things in the kind of ways that people seem to want, and we do that either in places in the city centre or places out in neighbourhoods or wherever it is we make those projects. I suppose I want to run through 3 examples to show you the range of the work that we do at the Culture Company. One example is that we applied this infrastructure to a museum. The other example is that we apply this kind of working method and working infrastructure to an intelligence project, which is a cultural database. And the other is to kind of create creative placemaking type projects. So just to show that the one working infrastructure or method can be applied to all of the different types of working. I totally understand that this is impossible to read, right? So I do get that. But it's just to kind of show, I suppose, from our point of view, we always think about things moving around in circles and affecting each other and getting us back to the starting point, but with more wisdom and more knowledge and more people at each turn. We are at 14 Henrietta Street, we are a new museum. We are award-winning. It is a social history museum. It has a lot of really good policy in its backbone in terms of accessibility, cultural policy, heritage, all of those kind of, huge sources around how we work. But it also works in a non-traditional way. We have a non-traditional museum operational style, even staffing. All of that is different because its approach is different in the first instance. Everything is cross-sectoral. We don't look at expertise of one kind. We looked at shared expertise. I mean, it's interesting, the talk earlier on this morning about science and arts, but we're looking at always this cross-sectoral version of life will bring us all a better impacts, I suppose. We're looking at engaged listening and storytelling all the time, and this kind of cycle, like I said, we talk in circles and always draw in circles on boards in the office, but it's important that there's a cycle of learning and development and learning from each other that comes with everything that we do. The Cultural Audit and Map is an intelligence project. It is a project about the data of culture in the city of Dublin. It could be a project about data, but it's also a project about how people use data. It's also a project about what kind of data. And just to kind of explain what we've made, therefore, in applying our mission and our working method to something like making an intelligence project or an audit, is that we've made something that the planners can use, the decision makers can use, the public can use, the artists can use, and they all use it a little bit differently. So it's all the same data is on different platforms to facilitate people using it in a way that suits how they want to use data. So the public-facing website is a website because people know how to use websites, and the search function is familiar search functions, whereas the data, the same data, but used by planners or inside in city councils or people who are making those kind of decisions, it comes into GIS systems or feature analyzer, map enterprise systems, or different things that they use where they can overlay it across other data to make cultural, decisions about culture for the city. So that we're looking at that, but at all times we kept in mind that people everywhere when we went talking to people kept telling us, we don't know what exists. We don't know what we want to do. We don't know where those things are. So our public facing would always be called Culture Near You because it's searching for something you're not sure what you want to do, but it's kind of near you is the idea. And so these are all different approaches to the same data and different outlets for the same data. So again, if you imagine that working model, what we find interesting about having produced this is that it's continually live, so it updates the servers on all 3 platforms every night. It can carry longitudinal data, so we can see the changes 2 years ago now in 2 years in relation to cultural spaces, networks and organisations that are in the city, which is a huge potential bit of information for others. And, it can be used for social prescribing, cultural prescription, all of those kind of projects. The data is here. A lot of those kind of projects spend a lot of time at the beginning looking to gather data, but here is the data, and now go on and do the project. So there's a huge augmented use for other organisations. And then applying this kind of working method to creative residencies, one of our other programs. And again, interesting, Maureen and Kieran were talking about science and art, but we've worked on a residency of sports and art, because there's a lot of people involved in the city sport and wellbeing partnership. And they wouldn't have interactions with artists, and artists wouldn't have interactions with them. And maybe if people start working together differently out of, again, cross-sectorally, maybe new things can happen. So we have currently 5 artists placed in 5 different sport forms. I don't know if sport form is a word like art form, but I've made it up, so it is now. And they are working with participants, with people who are in those clubs, with the sports officers and the club and the various, and they're going to make some stuff. We don't know all the things that they're going to make. There's going to be a video, there's going to be parade, there'll be dancing, there'll be all those kind of creative outputs when the residency concludes, but there'll also be these relationships that will be formed, and not only for the artists, but also for the members of the club, but also for the clubs, and also for the sports officers and for us. And we've done other residencies prior to this as well, and we're trying to do them with odd relationships or in odd places. So we've just completed one with King's Inns, which is the educational institute for barristers, people studying to become barristers. And we worked with an artist investigating kind of art and law and how that works together. She ended up making a permanent art piece, her first permanent art piece, which is now installed. We have one with a historian in residence for children. So there is a program of historian in residence, but it didn't have a historian that was specifically working with and for children. So we kind of added that to the program, because it's an important thing to kind of add value and try and create new relationships for people as participants. I'm going to finish now, but just to say that I suppose what we're thinking about is where culture does and can happen. We're thinking about how do people get involved in culture, and those are our big thinking points all the way through. We're trying to work as a company to create more ways into culture, making more opportunities for people to make things and get involved things and try out new things, and trying to work in a way that builds capacity, or habit is a big word, a kind of a cultural habit going forward, that you've included more things in your life, and that habit forming behavior kind of makes you do it regularly, and you bring your kids next time, and you bring your friend next time, and all those things. So what we want is to achieve wider cultural participation in the city, and kind of, like I said, develop those cultural habits, but also looking to bringing culture to places where culture doesn't happen, or with people who don't think they're doing culture, or they're doing some culture, but so that we're just trying to always expand and kind of looking at everything and everywhere, which I know are big terms, but that's really what we are looking for. A lot of people don't see themselves as part of culture. We, like I said, run this museum, and there's a lot of people who, when they leave, still don't say they were at a museum ever. If you ask them as they've left our building, have you ever been to a museum? They'd say, no, they haven't. And that's good, because somehow some of the words, and we spoke about words in the previous session as well, some of the words that certain, Kieran was saying words are good, jargon is good, and I'm the opposite. I think jargon is bad, because it's quite alienating, so these people who think they want to go to a place, but they definitely don't want to go to a museum, but they had a lovely time at that place, so that it's important, and they did have a lovely time, so let's not confuse them by telling them they were at a place they don't like when they actually liked it, so we have to kind of keep that in mind. And then we just want to work with new ways and on new things, and make an experience that for all of us is more confirming and makes us more confident about what we do. And so that's whistle top of the company. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, this is already exciting because I feel like I'm between two people who are at the leading edge of what they do and how they do it. And before we go to Jack, who's going to appear above my head, I want to talk a little bit about origins. So in a way, not that they're different, but the parallel of this is that, Deborah, quite often your students start with learning a particular instrument in a particular form, or whereas you're starting with place or questions or uncertainty, or
all of the above, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have one working method, except it's applied itself to loads of different types of work. And I find actually people, I love the opportunity to talk about the company, because people find that they don't understand it, because it is a bit the other way around. So it's one working method, but loads of different outputs, and it, that confuses people, because you think if you run a museum, you do that way, the museum way. But if you were doing placemaking projects, you do that way. And if you were doing like we do load of research around the impact of cultural participation, what it feels like, and what it makes you do next. And these things are really important. So if you imagine applying a one working method to loads of different types of things, it confuses people a lot.
Yeah.
But we think it's the way to do it, and we work on the basis of you're a person, and you're maybe interested in some things. Let's see what we can guide you towards.
What journey can we go on?
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
And a big part of that already, which we'll come back to later, is about I feel good, therefore I don't feel bad, so I'm going to get healthier. I'm connected. Now, we said that we'd make this more and more slightly complicated as it goes. So, in theory, Jack Nissen is somewhere above my head. See if it works.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you beautifully. And now I can see you.
Yeah, great stuff. Brilliant. Well, hello, hi Deborah, and hi Isolde and Dominic. It's brilliant to be here at Creative Brain Week. Thanks a lot for the talks as well. They're really interesting to hear. I was going to tell you a little bit about a group called Tinderbox Collective, which I work with in Scotland, in Edinburgh. A few thoughts about this kind of opening up creative spaces too in our work. So Tinderbox is we're a collective of young people, musicians, artists, youth workers, and we're based in Edinburgh in Scotland, and basically do lots and lots of creative projects trying to bring people together in lots of different ways. We tend to talk about our work in three core strands at the moment. One of them is called the Tinderbox Orchestra, which is kind of an original band really, with a whole sort of range of different instruments, rappers, singers, drummers and backline, all sorts of all the instruments in an orchestra, and playing lots of different styles, and really kind of encouraging music to be written by the people in the band or the people in the group. So lots of music from young people coming to the fore in a really exciting band. And yeah, kind of bringing lots of young people together with local bands as well, and lots of different styles, and trying to do something a bit interesting and exciting with the band. Then the other program we do is we call it a youth and community program. It's quite a wide program of kind of music-based youth clubs really, and workshops in different community settings in hospitals and schools. And the heart of that's a kind of big youth club that we run in an area called Muirhouse in North Edinburgh, with about 50 kids come every week. Some come just to hang out with each other and sort of make friends, then they split off and have songwriting lessons or different kind of instruments, and come back together for a big open mic in which all sorts of things tend to come to the fore, and then play together as a big band as well. But that's our youth and community program. And then the third strand is a bit more recent. It's called the Tinderbox Lab, which is kind of like a creative technology and kind of game design hub really, in a way. But it's kind of getting lots of artists from different backgrounds together to use technology in their work, or different kinds of electronics and different technology in different ways. So that's the kind of the roughly what we do on the whole. I'm going to just play, or somebody I hope is going to just play a show reel of the orchestra, just to give a bit of a feel for the kind of spirit of the group. This is more like the sort of the semi-professional side of the organisation, I suppose. So, but everybody you'll see on this kind of clip has come through the youth projects or come through different parts or are connected. They teach on some of the youth clubs and are connected in different ways. But hopefully it'll just give you a bit of a feel for what Tinderbox is like. I think somebody might play it from.
Descend upon the dissidents with dissonance, lyrical tip and never little insignificant.
Just to fill you in with what's happening in Dublin. So we can see you and we can see the video on the screen, but we can't see both at the same time. So the audience can't see the screen at the moment.
Right.
So
Okay.
do you want to jump to the next bit?
I can't really. I can just see myself here at the moment. So I'm just. Should I just keep talking?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So maybe you can have a look on the link and you can find a little clip of the video there. But I was thinking a little bit about kind of how we use how we maybe open up creative spaces in our work, or where that comes. And actually, I think there's quite a lot of similarities with what's been said already. Actually, in a way, which is good, feels nice to hear. But I think one of the kind of main things is that we do is to try and make ourselves, both the teachers or facilitators and the organisation generally, as adaptable and as flexible as possible, so that we can really respond to what everybody in the group really wants to do, their ideas, their ambitions, or their kind of their visions for themselves and for the organisation as well. And I think the flip side of that really is about putting lots of time into really getting to know everybody in the group, quite often in quite a one-to-one or personal way. So there's lots of really good conversations with everyone all the time, really. And I think building those kind of relationships is very important, because it takes time for people to have the confidence to put forward their ideas, really, quite often, and it takes time for people to really feel like they've got a place to do it. So I think putting lots of time into getting to know people, getting to really know where people are at and what they want, whether that's to do with a piece of music they're writing, or if it's a professional development aim that they want to get into being a professional, or anything really. And I think if you can get that happening, it becomes a really amazing kind of conversation. It becomes more like a kind of creative partnership with people, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're professional, and you kind of end up in these breaks down a typical student-pupil relationship in a way, and you start having just very creative conversations where you're sharing your skills and trying to figure out how to make the thing as good as possible wherever people are. And I think it also has the function of, I guess, bringing people along with a creative process in part of the kind of messy parts of a creative process before the final outcome. So people are part of those discussions and the ideas, and they can see an idea take shape, and they see something come from nothing to something, and they can sort of see all the processes behind that. And I think it helps to demystify a little bit what creativity can be, or how to go about it, which I think can feel quite woolly sometimes for people. And then I think the last thing that I was going to say with us is also about just building a very strong sense of community around people. So really welcoming and supportive and encouraging community. So people have got people to bounce ideas off, that they feel that they're always around places and people where they feel safe and comfortable to try things out and experiment and put their ideas forward again. And I think somebody mentioned something about kind of quality, like the idea of quality or changing quality. I kind of think that ambition and quality, I think, do come in, but it's not necessarily just about how you play the music. It's really about all of those things, really being ambitious about the relationships that you build with people, being really ambitious about how involved do people feel in the community, and and that kind of thing. I was thinking something similar sort of rung a chord as we were, ever since the beginning of Tinderbox, we were people used to ask whether it was a community project or a music project, or a youth project or a music project, as if the two things are somehow very separate. You either have a community project that's very inclusive but not very good, or you've got a music or arts project that's brilliant but not necessarily inclusive. And I completely agree, Deborah. I don't think that dichotomy needs to exist at all. So yeah, those were just a few thoughts about, I guess, how we think about creativity in our work. And maybe leave it there and pass it back to you, Dominic.
We kind of open it out and involve everybody else. So, over the pandemic, what's changed? You've had 2 years when you couldn't really do face-to-face work.
Yeah, the pandemic a sort of fascinating time in lots of ways. I think obviously we went online, swiveled online very, very quickly, like lots of people did. And I think there's a group. I think one of the interesting things that happens. We're part of a group. A kind of Scotland-wide group called the Music Education Partnership Group, which has done an amazing work kind of pulling together lots of music organisations from kind of schools, music services and instrumental services to out-of-school music projects and all sorts of things. And I think what happened over the pandemic for us is quite a lot of schools' music was quite restricted, I think, in terms of how quickly they could get online, how quickly they could adapt. But quite a lot of community-run organisations had a lot more freedom. So we were very quick to get on Zoom or trying to kind of build creative environments, I guess, online. And MEPEG, this Music Education Partnership Group, were very good at picking up all the things that were working around Scotland and putting them together in kind of lots of formats. So we've ended up doing loads and loads of online work in sort of all sorts of different areas, from international kind of collaborations through to community kind of great youth clubs to music schools to all sorts of things. And we've also found ourselves ended up talking to lots and lots more people around Scotland and lots of small schools, and it feels like there's a lot more crossover happening as a result in a way. And obviously it's nothing like playing in person, and it's not to replace it in any way, but it's brought lots of positives as well, I think. And it's kind of an interesting time now, seeing how they can all come together, much like me speaking here like this, I'd imagine.
Very like this, and that was kind of the point in a way, is that the pandemic has pushed everybody, I guess, to work in slightly different ways, but it's also created these opportunities for new relationships. You both, Isolde and Jack, talk a lot about the relationships needed to make creativity, or to make creative spaces. Deborah, in your world, what...
Pandemic-wise or relationship-wise?
Relationship-wise is where I'm going. Pandemic-wise might be a way through, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the pandemic could have been a way through. I mean, for us, we were living the Euripides quote, "Nothing is stronger than dire necessity." So my staff and my students were desperate to keep the lessons going. So within a week, we'd pivoted to online lessons. But what was fascinating were the number of global seminars where ourselves, Peabody in America, Yangtze in Singapore, we were dying to get together and meet and talk about what can we do here? What can we do to keep this going? And then pushing it, well, what do we keep afterwards? And you know, one of the great things about even this digital space, it's an enormously creative space. It's actually can be better at certain times. One of my teachers teaches Leaving Cert Music, and that will continue online. She has students from the Aran Islands clicking in. So the geographical disadvantage of music can be really solved through this. For us, we nurture relationships everywhere because our students are our most important relationship. But in terms of learning, the colleagues, you know, I looked up tinderbox. I'm going to be doing something with libraries just because I read that. So there's no shortage of brilliant information out there. And I think the age of information and technology has really made that possible.
And Ian talked a little bit about that this morning as a sort of the next stage. Why is creativity so important at the moment? Why is creativity a key skill? Because it's this age of information, this age of the brain in a way, which we understand in some ways. Pandemic-wise, what happened? And what's the good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of people in culture were lucky. We were able to move fast and pivot quickly. We also went through a phase, my team will kill me, but of like kind of overproducing nearly. Do you know what I mean? We were very busy for a bit. And they always laughed that I have them busy anyway, but it was like it was kind of on speed. And it was because that necessity thing, people felt like our contribution was being busy and making lots of things happen or whatever. But what we run some festivals as well and different things that I wasn't able to talk about in the slides, and we have grown audiences in those things, in those other avenues. The Culture Club is a kind of an audience development program which we do in partnership with all of the national culture institutions, and we grew new audiences for them. We face a challenge now about kind of keeping them to, not just the hybrid thing, because that's an obvious one, but also how do we get them kind of keep that engaged relationship online, rather than also just all jumping at the chance of bringing that relationship back in person. So that's our challenge now. But we did well in the pandemic in lots of ways, and we were able to keep everybody working who wanted to, and all of those things, but also grow audiences. So it was great that we could do that.
And the relationship with the audience, I think, is changing a little bit. I'm also interested in the relationship between the three of you. So if you have questions for each other, you'll fire away. Jack, for you over in Scotland, the relationship between you and the people that play with you, that's kind of key to what you do. Where might it go next? How do you think that's going to develop?
I think it depends really on what the relationship. It so depends on what the relationship is, or what the partnership is, or the collaboration is, and how you kind of which bits of the digital side of things you can use to sort of effectively. I mean, with the project we just did just before this talk was called Somata Sessions, and that was connecting kind of community groups and artists in different countries just via their phones, but literally from a community centre in Kenya with a bunch of young dancers, with a puppeteer in Delhi. With us in a practice room in Edinburgh, all just on our phones, and that's been amazing for getting to know each other and getting some of the young people to meet each other and feel like we've broken down that kind of initial barrier, and to play music and do that in the same way that you would live has been a really good start. And then in terms of where that goes next, I think we've just started having more. It's sort of stimulated much more in-depth creative conversations about how we could write music together, or how we could kind of do some recordings, or how we could link up better. I think maybe another interesting thing on the relationship side is that we started this online music school. We split our youth club into a kind of online music school and a youth club online, just because they were short. It was a bit too long to keep them all together. And the online music school's carried on, and the kids are really enjoying coming to small group lessons. And so maybe 50 or 60 kids still come online on a Saturday morning, even though the youth clubs come back to in person. And the result has been, and we ended up starting a kind of instrument library over the lockdown as well, delivering instruments to kids so that they could get involved. And the whole kind of jigsaw of that has really helped. So I think the kids' learning has come on enormously, and they've actually been coming to a Saturday to get a lesson, then coming to a youth club to play together and meet each other. And it's less directly hybrid like a kind of conference like this, but it's more like kind of taking some good bits there which are more geographically accessible, or more accessible in certain ways, and then finding the right ways to piece them together later on. I think. I don't know. I think it's really, really varied. I don't think it's a sort of a simple answer. I think there's just loads and loads of different ways to build relationships, online and offline, and then join them up creatively to sort of strengthen the relationships really, and strengthen the kind of creative ideas between people.
You talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there are more opportunities than you can shake a stick at, it has to be said, in my world. But I think where it all comes back to one thing, which is letting the student be empowered, actually almost no matter what age they are. And that's a big shift in conservatoires, because we're used to the educational model where, a student is an empty vessel and you pour music into them. And it doesn't matter, this is how I teach. And this is what I teach, and you're just going to fit. We're now really looking to turn that on its head, because we want to encourage different demographics, different ethnicities, a much more diverse community. And in order to do this, what Power Relations and Higher Music Education is doing, this EU project that the Academy is leading, is actually looking at the unconscious and unexamined things we do every day that disempowers and disengages people who are not quite from a kind of a narrow white middle class background, to be honest with you. So our quest in the 21st century is to enable a much broader demographic of people to see the conservatoire as something relevant and inspiring for their own creativity. That's going to take us probably 10 years. No more, but probably 10.
You've been using technology in a completely different way, haven't you? You've got an orchestra. A different kind of orchestra.
Yeah, the Open Youth Orchestra of Ireland was probably our flagship in this area. And this was an orchestra that was developed from 4 provincial ensembles with physically or intellectually challenged individuals, some with cerebral palsy, some with different situations where they would have been barred from making music in the past. But using VR technology, using iPads, MacBooks, they are creating their own individual sound, and then they're working together as an ensemble to create concerted ensemble music. And then in September 2019, so just kind of before COVID, they came together as the Open Youth Orchestra of Ireland in Athlone, and they had a residential 4 or 5 days, and then they performed as the youth orchestra. They should have that right, just like the National Youth Orchestra of Ireland. Now, that ain't easy, but it is so demonstrably the right thing to do that we're putting an awful lot of energy and effort into understanding how this group can thrive. I have heard performances from other similar groups that bring forth astonishing music, and this is what I call, a new aesthetic, contemporary cutting-edge music. So that's one of the most exciting things that we're focusing on at the moment.
And I heard some of that. It sounds almost like, I don't know, contemporary electronica or contemporary electronic jazz, or I don't know where you go with it, really.
Yeah, it's
have no
cool.
words for
It's
it.
very,
It's
very
cool.
techno and forward-looking and exciting music, and they had a ball in that residential.
I'm going to come out to the audience and ask questions in a second. We've got a few minutes left. So you might be kind of jotting them down or getting them ready or putting them on if you're on digital land. Isil, what's the future? Where are you heading to? What's coming up? You're going around in circles.
We're still doing circles, yeah. I mean, we joke in the office, world domination. The more we connect with other people who want to do things a little bit different, who don't want to, be the museum in the traditional way and be the art project in the traditional way, or all of those things, that we're just really looking at people-led approaches to all sorts of things in the area of culture, creativity, arts, sports, whatever it is, and working with like-minded people, but also just being everywhere that needs us, and meeting all the people that want to come on a journey with us. And making sure that there's pathways to habit forming, cultural relationships, or creativity, to other things and other places, and that we keep going in that way.
And it's so much more than how do we get people involved in the arts with you, because it's how do we get people involved in the arts becomes data, the data changes the city. So are you're making the city more creative?
Sure.
You're making the city healthier?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, but
You
yes,
can
I mean
measure it?
that's the point of that statement that is in our company strategy and stuff. Like, the more you are, think of the lockdowns, the people who had good lockdowns. They got more involved locally. They found their local park. They found their local community group that did litter picking or whatever. All of these they started doing dancing in my local park. There was dancing. I didn't realize people met and did dancing, and now they were doing it in the park, and it inspired other people to do that. Do you know what I mean?
So partly you're making it visible, and
making it visible, but it's already also, a lot of people are doing it. They just don't call it those things.
Yeah.
So it's allowing it to happen. In people's confidences, in their habit forming behaviours, in their we've talked about this. You and I have talked about this a lot. About if you kind of go and you do something and it was nice, and you talked about it with somebody else, and you thought about what it meant for you, and then you bring your friend to it the next time, or your kid, and you share the information with somebody else. That all of this is learning cycle. All of this is habit forming, and all of this creates a better lifestyle with culture, and yes, a healthier lifestyle within your community and yourself.
And on Monday, you can listen to people talk about neuroplasticity, talking about behaviourism, talking about how because one of the difficult things is to get people, or not get people, how do people change the behaviours that they start with? How do you change a bad habit? It's an incredibly sticky thing in terms of the way that the brain works, and in terms of brain health. It's exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to go out there to our interrogator. Hello. Sarah Morrow, have you got questions for us?
Yeah, I'm wondering, does anyone in the audience have questions?
Thanks very much. I wonder how intentional is the linkage with what you're doing with health? I mean, we mentioned about cultural prescribing, but I'm just curious about, people know that fitness is good, it's good for your health, it's a health promoting, but on just culture, are people aware that culture, music, that it is good for your health? I'm just wondering then, do you intentionally link in with services and to actually promote this message?
Deborah first, maybe.
I remember one of the heads of clinical psychology in one of the psychiatric hospitals saying to me that he had to go to the symphony orchestra on a Friday for the sake of his emotional and mental well-being. Our link to health at the moment would be certain modules for music and healthcare settings, music therapy, and also in nurturing the mental health primarily and well-being of our own students. There is research and there's good work being done in conservatories in healthcare settings, promoting the health, probably not. We're probably still a little bit more inward looking than that from our point of view.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, we have, I suppose we would have ambitions for sure, but we've made attempts towards relationships. We can say COVID has delayed some of that, but I actually think it's probably distrust of cross-sectoral working which prevented everybody to jump in bed together on it. I don't think anybody disagrees that there should be crossover, and crossover is good. I don't think anybody disagrees that people with using memory and music and things to work through their own memories and lives, in a very simple way, as well as all of the other things that we know for those who have a cultural life and a creative life within themselves, the power of reading and all of the things that we know so well now from the pandemic in terms of what kept us all moving, with our own sanity, let alone physical health, of dancing, of moving, and social health, of being together in a group, doing something. There's no disagreement. I think there's a little bit of, are we going to dance together with some of the different organisations? And we've been a little bit slow, but they've been a little bit slow, but there's work to be done for sure. And we know, I think the strength comes from sectoral togetherness on working on projects properly. And I don't like to live in a dance of who's going to pay for it, because I think if there's a good enough idea, the money will come,
So we're pretty much at time. We could go on for ages. We could join in. Jack, I'd love to ask you the same question. We could talk about some projects we came across yesterday when we visited the Abbey. You have a project with surgeons talking about the challenge of being a surgeon by standing on a stage and changing the language that they use to change the way that they feel. We could go on all week, which we're going to do. This is just the first day. It's only the third session or something. It's made great by the people that joined me on the stage. So Isabel Byrne from Dublin City Council Culture Company, thank you. Deborah Kelleher from the Royal Irish Academy of Music, and Jack Nissen from Tinderbox. Thank you so much.